Think about the last time you went home. Or if home is complicated, the last time you were with your family of origin in any significant way. Maybe it was a holiday. Maybe a funeral. Maybe just Sunday dinner. And notice what happened to you in that space. Not just what was said or what events occurred, but what happened to you internally. Did you get smaller? Did you get louder? Did you find yourself managing everyone else's emotions before you'd even taken your coat off? Did you slip, almost without realizing it, into a version of yourself that you thought you'd outgrown, more anxious, more invisible, more responsible for everything, more like the child you were in that house than the adult you were everywhere else? If any of that landed, you already understand, at a felt level, what we're talking about today. Family systems pull. They have gravity. And part of what creates that pull is the role, the assigned, largely unspoken, fiercely maintained position in the family's emotional ecosystem that was given to you, often before you were old enough to have any say in the matter. A role you learned to inhabit so thoroughly that for a long time it probably felt less like a role and more like just who you are. Today we're pulling that apart. We're going to talk about what family systems are and why they assign roles in the first place, how those roles form and why they persist so stubbornly into adulthood, and we're going to walk through 10 of the most common family roles, what each one looks like, what function it serves for the family, and what it costs the person who holds it. This video is for anyone who has ever sat across from a therapist and said, "I don't know why I keep doing this, it's like something just takes over when I'm around my family." And it's for the therapist sitting across from them, looking for a framework that helps make the invisible visible. A worksheet that maps all 10 roles is linked in the description. It's a resource for personal reflection and for clinical use. Let's start with the system itself. Section 1. What is a family system? Family systems theory emerged in the mid-20th century through the work of psychiatrist Murray Bowen and others who noticed something that seems obvious in retrospect but was genuinely revolutionary at the time: you cannot fully understand an individual without understanding the relational system they come from. A person is not a standalone unit. They are a node in a network, shaped by, responsive to, and in constant reciprocal relationship with the other nodes around them. The family, in this framework, is understood as a system, a set of interconnected parts that function together to maintain stability and equilibrium. And like all systems, the family system has one overriding drive: homeostasis. The maintenance of the familiar. The preservation of the existing order, even when that order is painful, dysfunctional, or costly to some of its members. This homeostatic drive is not malicious. It is not a conspiracy against growth or individuation. It is simply the system doing what systems do, resisting change because change is destabilizing, and destabilization feels threatening to a structure that has organized itself around a particular configuration. What this means practically is that families develop patterns, repeating, self-reinforcing patterns of interaction, communication, and emotional regulation that become the invisible operating system of the family's life together. And within those patterns, individual members are assigned, or drift into, or are conscripted into, particular roles that serve the system's need for balance and function. Virginia Satir, one of the founders of family therapy, described family roles as the positions people occupy in the family's emotional economy, the ways each member contributes to the system's stability, even when the contribution itself is harmful to that individual. The family needs a hero, so it produces one. The family needs a scapegoat for its unspoken tension, so it assigns one. The family needs someone to make it laugh when things get heavy, so it elects a mascot. None of this is spoken. All of it is enforced. And the roles that form in childhood don't stay in childhood. They follow us, into our adult relationships, our workplaces, our friendships, our parenting. Until we see them clearly enough to have a choice about them. Section 2. How roles form, and why they stick. Roles don't form randomly. They form in response to the specific needs and dynamics of a particular family system, and they are assigned to particular children based on a combination of birth order, temperament, the family's specific stress points, and the needs of the parents. A child in a family with a parent struggling with addiction may take on a caretaking role out of genuine necessity, because someone has to manage what the parent cannot. A child in a family where emotional expression is threatening may learn to suppress their own needs and become the invisible, easy child, because that adaptation reduces conflict and keeps the system stable. A child who receives the family's displaced anxiety and blame becomes the scapegoat, not because they are actually the problem, but because the system needs somewhere to put what it cannot otherwise process. What makes roles so tenacious is that they are reinforced, constantly and powerfully, through the family's responses. The hero child is praised for achievement and competence and learns that their value is conditional on performance. The caretaker is rewarded with belonging and approval when they attenuate themselves in service of others. The scapegoat discovers that acting out at least produces a consistent, predictable response, and that even negative attention is preferable to invisibility. The role becomes identity. The child stops experiencing it as something they do and starts experiencing it as something they are. And by the time they are old enough to examine it, if they ever are, it is so embedded in their self-concept, their relational patterns, and their nervous system's baseline settings that extracting themselves from it requires sustained, intentional effort. There is also a powerful social reinforcement mechanism at work. Families do not, as a rule, welcome the departure of a member from their assigned role. When the scapegoat stops accepting blame, the system looks for another scapegoat, or redoubles its pressure on the original one. When the caretaker starts setting limits on their giving, the family experiences this as abandonment or betrayal. When the hero starts being human and imperfect, the family's anxiety escalates. The system pushes back. And that pushback, experienced as guilt, disapproval, relational withdrawal, or outright conflict, is often what keeps people locked in roles long past the point where they have outgrown them. With that foundation in place, let's walk through the 10 roles. Section 3, the 10 common family roles. As we go through these, I want to invite you to hold them with some flexibility. Real people are rarely one role exclusively. Many people carry elements of 2 or 3, or shift roles depending on which family member they're in relationship with. The point isn't a precise categorical label. The point is recognition. Role 1, the hero. The hero is the high-achieving, responsible, put-together child, the one whose accomplishments bring the family pride and create a public face of functionality that may mask significant private dysfunction. The hero learned early that their worth is earned through performance, and they have been performing ever since. The function the hero serves for the family is provision or external validation, proof that the family is fine, successful, capable of producing something admirable. In families where shame and dysfunction are present beneath the surface, the hero's achievements become a kind of currency that buys the family's self-esteem. The cost to the hero is profound. Beneath the competence is often a crushing anxiety about failure, an inability to rest, a deep uncertainty about whether they are lovable outside of their achievements, and a chronic disconnection from their own emotional life, because emotions were a distraction from the performance and a liability in the role. Heroes often arrive in therapy exhausted, successful by every external measure, and completely unable to identify what they actually feel or want. Role 2, the scapegoat. The scapegoat is the identified problem, the one who acts out, gets in trouble, brings home the report card that confirms everyone's worst fears, and absorbs the family's projected anxiety and unspoken shame. The scapegoat is often the most emotionally honest person in the family, the one whose behavior is expressing what no one else is allowed to say. The function the scapegoat serves is displacement, the family's pain, conflict, and dysfunction are directed outward onto this child, which allows the system to avoid examining its own dynamics. The scapegoat's problems become the family's story about itself, obscuring the deeper issues that are actually driving the dysfunction. The cost is enormous and lasting. Scapegoats internalize the family's narrative about them. I am the problem, I am bad, I am the reason things are hard, and carry that identity into adulthood in ways that affect self-worth, relationships, and the choices they make about their own lives. Many of the adults sitting in therapy offices today who struggle with shame, self-sabotage, and a deep conviction of their own defectiveness were the scapegoat in their family system. Role 3. The Golden Child. The golden child is idealized, held as the favored one, the special one, the child who can do no wrong in the eyes of a particular parent. Unlike the hero, whose status is earned through achievement, the golden child's status is granted, often arbitrarily, and often as an extension of a narcissistic parent's self-projection. The function the golden child serves is as a mirror for the idealized parent, a reflection of their own grandiosity, a repository for their unlived dreams, a validation of their superiority. The golden child is loved, but conditionally, loved for who the parent needs them to be, not necessarily for who they actually are. The cost, which is often invisible from the outside, includes a fragile sense of self built on conditional approval, profound difficulty with accountability and failure, an underdeveloped capacity for empathy toward others, because the family system organized itself around their needs, and a deep, sometimes unconscious anxiety about what would happen if they fell from favor. Golden children often become adults who are confusingly brittle, talented and charming and yet unable to tolerate ordinary disappointment or feedback. Role 4. The Lost Child. The lost child is the invisible one, the child who learned that the safest strategy in their family was to take up as little space as possible. They don't cause trouble. They don't demand attention. They disappear into their room, into their books, into their inner world, and the family, absorbed in its other dramas, is largely grateful for one less thing to manage. The function the lost child serves is reduction of demand, one less person requiring the family's limited emotional resources. In families under significant stress, the child who asks for nothing is experienced as a gift. What is not seen is what it cost him to ask for nothing. The cost is a life lived in the background. Lost children often grow into adults who struggle with invisibility, who feel overlooked, who have difficulty identifying and expressing their needs, who are deeply uncomfortable with attention and yet quietly, painfully lonely. They learned that having needs was dangerous or burdensome, and they have been suppressing those needs ever since. Role 5. The Mascot. The mascot is the family's relief valve, the one who uses humor, charm, and lightness to diffuse tension, distract from pain, and keep the family's emotional temperature from reaching a boiling point. The mascot is often deeply loved and deeply burdened, because the job of making everything okay through laughter and charm is an exhausting one, and it requires the relentless suppression of any authentic distress. The function the mascot serves is emotional regulation for the entire family system. They are the thermostat, turned to funny when things get too serious, too angry, too sad. And while this may look like a natural personality trait, it is more accurately understood as an adaptive strategy developed in response to a family that could not tolerate its own emotional reality. The cost is the loss of permission to not be okay. Mascots often struggle enormously with depression and anxiety beneath the humor, because they learned that their darkness was unwelcome, that their job was to lighten the mood, and that showing up in distress was a violation of the role. They are the ones who make everyone laugh and then go home and fall apart alone. Role 6. The Caretaker. The caretaker is the one who holds everyone else together, attending to the emotional, physical, or logistical needs of parents or siblings in ways that are well beyond what is developmentally appropriate for a child. The caretaker is often described as an old soul, mature beyond their years, so naturally giving and attentive. What is not always seen is that this maturity was not a gift, it was a requirement. The function the caretaker serves is stabilization of a system that is otherwise insufficiently held by its adults, often in families with mental illness, addiction, illness, or emotional immaturity in the parental generation. The caretaker steps into the gap and does the holding. And in doing so, they forfeit large portions of their own childhood. This role overlaps significantly with what is called parentification, the inappropriate assignment of adult-level emotional or functional responsibility to a child. The cost of this role is a deep confusion between love and labor, chronic overgiving, significant difficulty receiving care, and an identity so built around others' needs that the caretaker genuinely struggles to know what their own needs are. They are often the adults who end up in helping professions, and in therapy discovering, sometimes for the first time, that their own pain is also allowed to matter. Role 7. The peacemaker. The peacemaker is the one who cannot tolerate conflict and has made it their life's work to prevent it. They mediate, smooth over, apologize on behalf of others, position themselves between warring parties, and sacrifice their own comfort and truth in the service of keeping things calm. The peacemaker often grows up in a home where conflict was frightening, explosive, unpredictable, or chronic, and learned that their job was to make sure it never got that far. The function the peacemaker serves is conflict suppression. They absorb and diffuse tension before it escalates. This makes them genuinely valuable to a dysregulated family system. It also means they learn to abandon themselves in the process. The cost is a profound difficulty with healthy conflict in adult relationships, an inability to tolerate disagreement, a compulsive need to resolve tension immediately even at the cost of their own perspective, and a deep confusion between actual peace and the mere absence of visible conflict. Peacemakers often have enormous difficulty saying what is true for them when they believe it might upset someone. They become adults who are chronically agreeable and quietly resentful, because their genuine experience has never had a sanctioned place. Role 8. The parentified child. The parentified child takes on a specific subset of the caretaker role, one that is explicitly parental. This is the child who became their parents' emotional confidant, their logistical manager, their support system. The child who was told too much about the marriage, consulted on financial decisions, leaned on during the parents' emotional crises, and made responsible for the emotional well-being of younger siblings. The function the parentified child serves is emotional regulation for the adult, filling a gap in the parent's own support system by using the child's availability and love against them. This is not always done with cruelty or consciousness. Many parentifying parents are themselves survivors of inadequate care, reaching for the nearest available attachment figure without fully recognizing what they are asking. The cost is the theft of the developmental experience of simply being a child. Parentified children grow into adults who are exquisitely attuned to others' emotional states, extraordinarily capable, and often entirely unable to be in a relationship as an equal, because every significant relationship they have learned to navigate has been organized around their service to someone else's greater need. They are used to being needed. Being wanted, simply for themselves, is unfamiliar and uncomfortable territory. Role 9. The rebel. The rebel is the one who pushes against the family system's rules, norms, and expectations, sometimes in ways that are genuinely destructive, and sometimes in ways that, viewed from outside the system, look more like health than pathology. The rebel is the one who names what isn't being named, refuses to play the game, and pays a significant social price within the family for doing so. The function the rebel serves is paradoxical. They are often the family's symptom bearer, the one whose behavior makes the system's dysfunction impossible to deny. But they can also, in some family systems, be a kind of integrity, the person who refuses the pretense, who will not pretend that things are fine when they are not. The cost depends enormously on how the rebellion is expressed. At its most destructive, the rebel role produces adults who are compulsively oppositional, unable to exist within structures, chronically in conflict with authority, allergic to any kind of conformity even when conformity would serve them. At its most constructive, the former rebel becomes the adult who is genuinely, courageously themselves, but only after doing significant work to disentangle autonomous self-expression from reflexive reactivity against whatever the family represented. Role 10. The enabler. The enabler is the one who maintains the family's dysfunction by absorbing its consequences, covering for the addicted parent, managing the aftermath of the volatile parent's episodes, making excuses to the outside world, filling in the gaps left by someone who is not functioning. The enabler keeps the system running despite the damage. And in doing so, they remove the natural consequences that might otherwise create pressure for change. The function the enabler serves is preservation of the status quo. They are the system's shock absorber, the person whose labor and self-erasure make it possible for the dysfunction to continue without fully collapsing the family structure around it. The cost is identical to the caretaker in many respects, with the additional burden of shame and complicity, the knowledge, often half-formed and long suppressed, that their enabling contributed to the continuation of something that was harming them and others. Enablers often struggle deeply with boundary setting in adult life, with distinguishing between genuine care and compulsive rescue, and with the profound grief of recognizing what their labor cost them and what it failed to actually fix. Section 4. What roles cost us in adulthood? The through line across all 10 of these roles is this: every role requires the child to sacrifice some portion of their authentic self in service of the family system's needs. And the self that gets sacrificed, the parts that were too inconvenient, too needy, too angry, too visible, too sad, too much, doesn't simply disappear. It goes underground. It waits. The adult who is still playing their family role is not weak or unaware. They are operating from a deeply grooved, highly reinforced set of strategies that once kept them safe and connected in the most important environment of their early life. The role worked. It was adaptive. It was, in a real sense, intelligent. The problem is that the environment has changed and the role hasn't. What family roles cost us in adulthood varies by role, but the common thread is a restriction of the full range of who we are allowed to be. The hero cannot rest. The scapegoat cannot trust. The lost child cannot ask. The mascot cannot hurt. The caretaker cannot receive. The peacemaker cannot disagree. The rebel cannot yield. The enabler cannot walk away. And the nervous system keeps the score. The anxiety that gets activated when the hero fails, the shame that floods the scapegoat when they're criticized, the panic the peacemaker feels when conflict is brewing, these are not irrational responses. They are the emotional memory of what it once cost to step outside the role. The body remembers, even when the mind has moved on. For therapists, family roles often surface not as explicit material that clients bring to session, but as patterns that emerge in the therapeutic relationship itself. The client who is excessively accommodating, who cannot identify their own needs, who apologizes constantly, who performs wellness, these are roles in action. Naming the role, with curiosity and without pathologizing, is often the entry point into some of the most important work in the therapy. Section 5. Stepping out of the role. The good news, and there is genuinely good news here, is that roles are not destiny. They are patterns. And patterns can be examined, understood, and gradually, with real effort and real support, changed. The first step is always awareness. You cannot step out of a role you cannot see. This is why naming is so powerful. Why the moment of recognition, the "oh, that's what I've been doing, that's what this is," can feel so simultaneously clarifying and destabilizing. Seeing the role clearly is not comfortable. But it is the beginning of everything. The second step is grieving what the role cost. Not in a way that is self-pitying or that gets permanently mired in the past, but in a way that honestly reckons with what was asked of you, what you gave, and what you didn't get. The hero grieves the childhood spent performing instead of being. The lost child grieves the years of invisibility. The caretaker grieves the needs that never got met because they were too busy meeting everyone else's. This grief is not optional. It is the portal through which change becomes possible. The third step is the slow, often uncomfortable work of behaving differently, inside the family and outside it. Of letting the hero fail without catastrophizing. Of letting the lost child ask for something. Of letting the mascot say, "I'm not okay today." The family will push back. The internal alarm system will activate. And doing it anyway, with support, with intention, with a therapist or trusted other who can help hold the ground, is what gradually rewires the pattern. The worksheet linked in the description walks through all 10 roles with reflection prompts for identifying your own role, understanding the function it served, and beginning to examine what it has cost you and what stepping out of it might look like. It's a starting place, and starting places matter. The role you were given in your family was not an accident, and it was not your fault. It was the system's solution to the system's needs. And for a long time, playing it was the most adaptive, intelligent, connected thing you could do. But you are not 11 years old anymore. You are not still in that house, managing that emotional climate, keeping that system stable with your own self-erasure. You are an adult with the capacity to examine what you inherited, to grieve what it cost you, and to choose, with intention and support, a different way of being in the world. That choice doesn't erase where you came from. It doesn't require you to stop loving your family or to reduce them to their dysfunction. It just asks you to stop paying for their equilibrium with your own. The 10 Common Family Roles worksheet is linked in the description. It's a tool for this exact work. Use it for yourself, use it with clients, use it as the starting place for a conversation you've been circling around for years. If this video gave you language for something you've been carrying, share it with someone else who needs the words. And I'll see you in the next one.